Many consider the GoPro primarily as a camera to shoot videos, but you can also take great and interesting photos with it. The wide-angle lens and the waterproof and shockproof body make it possible to take photos that would not always be possible with another camera in this way. If you're interested in the settings available in the photo mode, in what they do and how you can get the best results, then take a few minutes for this video. My name is Werner, I live in the Italian Alps, and this channel is about GoPro filmmaking tutorials and reviews of consumer cameras. Consider subscribing to the channel if you're new here and have fun with this video. If you switch to the photo mode, you will see in the default configuration, in the upper left corner, the shortcut for the timer. If you, for example, want to take a selfie, you can set up the camera in a suitable place and have 3 or 10 seconds to get into position before the camera takes the picture. The timer is also useful for long exposures. Suppose you are using your camera on a tripod and take a long exposure in low light conditions. The shot may be blurred because you press the shutter button and move the camera. You can prevent this by activating the timer. On the bottom left, you see the shortcut for the field of view or the digital lens. Here you can choose between wide, linear and narrow. Wide is the standard field of view of the GoPro. Wide corresponds to a focal length of about 16 mm, but the fisheye lens causes distortions. These distortions are especially strong at the edges and are especially visible if you have straight lines in the frame. If these distortions bother you, you can select linear, but this will result in a crop and your image will only have a focal length of about 19 mm. Linear is also not completely free of distortions. With narrow, you get an even stronger crop and a focal length of 27 mm. Personally, I mostly use wide, because for me the extremely wide angle is a special feature of the GoPro, but of course this is a matter of taste and everyone has to decide for himself. In the upper right corner you see the shortcut for the probably most important setting in the photo mode of the GoPro, the output. You can choose between standard, HDR, Superphoto and RAW. In standard photo mode, the camera takes a normal photo without special processing. The photo is saved in the JPEG format. In HDR mode, the camera takes several images with different exposures and overlays them. In this way, the dynamic range of the resulting image is increased. You get more details in the very dark and very bright areas of the image. To get a correct overlay, you should hold the camera steady. Otherwise, the picture will look blurred or so-called ghosting artifacts will appear. An HDR image can sometimes look very good and spectacular, but it can also look a bit unnatural. In Superphoto mode, the camera will decide autonomously how it will process your photo. This mode is especially interesting if you don't want to edit your photos yourself. According to GoPro, depending on the situation, the camera will create an HDR or add other effects such as tone mapping. In practice, I have found that in most cases, a very similar effect is applied. The photo contains much more contrast and clarity compared to a classic JPEG. If you are interested in a detailed comparison, have a look at my corresponding video. Overall, the photo gets more punch and looks more interesting at first sight than a photo taken in standard mode. The problem is that you cannot control the effect. You can't say for sure how the camera will process the photo. If you prefer to edit your photos yourself, you should activate the RAW mode. You will get a RAW file in the GPR file format in addition to a classic JPEG file. The advantage is that this file contains much more information than a normal JPEG file, so you have more possibilities when you edit your image later on. The biggest disadvantage is that you need the right software to edit the image. Without workarounds, this can only be done with software by Adobe, for example Lightroom or Camera Raw. Personally, I like Lightroom and the simple workflow of the program. That's why I mostly use the RAW mode on the GoPro. In the RAW mode, the field of view linear and the field of view narrow are not available. On the bottom right, you can see the shortcut for the zoom feature. With this touch to zoom feature, you should know that it is only a digital zoom. This means that the image quality of your photo decreases when you zoom in. You can always adjust the frame of your photos in post. Therefore, you should only use this feature if you do not intend to edit your photos. If you tap on the button at the bottom center, the menu of the shooting modes will open. You can choose between 4 basic shooting modes. The classic photo mode for a single photo in good lighting conditions. The LiveBurst mode for capturing a burst of photos both 1.5 seconds before and 1.5 seconds after the shutter button is pressed. These photos can also be shared as a short clip. The classic burst mode for taking several photos in a row if you don't want to miss the right moment during a fast action scene, and the night mode for taking photos in low light conditions. Let's look at the classic photo mode first. If you tap on the pen at the right, you will enter the respective settings menu. As you can see, you can set the lens, the output, scheduled capture, the timer and the zoom. Apart from scheduled capture, we have already discussed all these settings, as they are available as shortcuts. With scheduled capture, you can schedule the exact time of a capture. For example, you might want to capture a sunrise without getting up in the morning. Then you can enter the time of the capture here. For example, 6 o'clock in the morning. Personally, I think that the time-lapse mode is more suitable for such situations. If you scroll down, you can set the Protune settings. You could say that these are even more advanced settings. I will now briefly show you the Protune settings and explain which settings I personally use. Basically, you have very similar settings options here as in video mode. Shutter. Here you can set the exposure time. However, only very short exposure times are available. You can manually reduce the exposure time, for example, to 1/2000th of a second to freeze especially fast movements. For long exposure times, you have to switch to the night photo mode. In most cases, I leave the shutter on auto. With exposure value compensation, you can expose the image brighter by setting a positive value and darker by setting a negative value. It depends then, of course, on the situation which setting is optimal. If you are afraid that bright areas in the image will burn out, you should set a slightly negative value. Don't forget that an HDR or the exposure control using the touch display might be the best solution for these cases. White balance. Here you can determine how warm or cool your image should look. If you leave this setting at auto, the camera will try to adjust the white balance so that white looks white rather than slightly yellowish or bluish. For photos, I leave this setting at auto. The ISO value determines how sensitively the camera reacts to light. So if you take a photo in low light, your camera will increase the ISO value. A higher ISO value also allows you to increase the shutter speed to avoid camera shake. However, a high ISO value has the disadvantage of creating image noise. From a value of 800, this can be seen relatively well on the GoPro. Therefore, I set ISO minimum to 100 and ISO maximum to 400. For a better image quality, I recommend using a tripod and lowering the shutter speed to avoid high ISO values. If absolutely necessary, you can of course set the ISO value higher than 400. The sharpness is automatically set to high. You can also set it to low or medium. The photo then looks much softer. While I reduce the sharpness for videos in order to get a more cinematic image, I leave the sharpness at high for photos. Color. Here you can use a flat color profile to have more flexibility when editing your photos. In photography, flat color profiles are rather unusual in contrast to filmmaking. Those who want the maximum flexibility for the edit will usually work with RAW files. Now let's take a quick look at the other shooting modes. LiveBurst. In LiveBurst mode, the camera takes 30 images per second for 3 seconds, so it shoots 90 photos in total. The special thing about this is that it captures 1.5 seconds before the shutter button is pressed and 1.5 seconds after the shutter button is pressed. This is possible because the camera actually shoots continuously when you switch to this mode. However, the camera only stores permanently when you press the shutter button. You can imagine that this costs quite a lot of energy. You should therefore only activate this mode when you really need it. For example, if something interesting happens and you are afraid to press the shutter button at the wrong moment. You can then use the GoPro app to choose the best photo. The 90 photos are also available as a short clip that you can share on Instagram, for example. Under megapixels, you can choose whether you want your photos to be taken at 12 or 8 megapixels. 12 megapixels mean better quality but also more storage space. Also, older smartphones might have difficulties processing the amount of data. Apart from that, you can additionally schedule a capture, set a timer and a zoom. As lens, only white is available. In the Protune settings, raw audio and wind are available in addition to the usual settings. Both refer to the audio because with a LiveBurst the audio is also captured. With raw audio, you could set that the camera creates additional WAV files to be able to better edit the sound. I set raw audio to off. The GoPro has 3 microphones. Depending on the wind situation, one or the other microphone could be deactivated to reduce the wind noise. You can turn this feature on or off here. I leave the setting at auto. Burst. In burst mode, the camera takes several photos in a quick sequence, one after the other. You need this for fast action scenes, for example. By shooting multiple photos per second, the camera prevents you from missing the perfect moment. When it comes to the settings, the burst rate is especially interesting. Here you can set how many pictures per second the camera should take. The first number refers to the number of images, the second number to the number of seconds. So 30/6 means that the camera will shoot 30 images in a period of 6 seconds. That is 5 images per second. So it depends on the situation and how long your action sequence lasts, which setting is optimal here. There is also an automatic function, which takes up to 25 pictures for 1 second, depending on the lighting conditions. Under output, you can activate the RAW mode. Superphoto and HDR are not available. Apart from that, you can set the lens, schedule capture, the timer and the zoom. The Protune settings are available too. Night photo. The night mode was made for low light conditions. The camera's automatic system prefers longer exposure times and lower ISO values compared to the standard photo mode. This leads to optimal results in low light conditions. For this mode, however, you should always use your camera on a tripod, otherwise the picture will be blurred. In the video description you will find links for suitable tripods and my other favorite GoPro accessories. As far as the settings in the night mode are concerned, a few things change compared to the standard photo mode. The timer is set to 3 seconds by default, which you can of course change. In contrast to the normal photo mode under shutter, there are very long exposure times of up to 30 seconds available. Apart from that, the usual settings are available. Superphoto and HDR are not available here either. Interestingly, a maximum ISO value of 800 can be set. This is supposed to reduce image noise and achieve a better image quality. In summary, you should use this mode whenever you want to take long exposures with a tripod in low light conditions. Now that this tutorial has become quite long again, I would like to give you a short summary of the most important informations. On the Hero 9 there are 4 shooting modes available for photos. The standard photo mode for single photos in good lighting conditions. LiveBurst for 90 photos within 3 seconds, where the first 45 photos are taken before the shutter button is pressed. You also get a short clip of 3 seconds which you can share immediately. Burst for multiple photos within a few seconds. Here you can choose the number of photos and the length of the recording yourself. The night mode is for taking pictures in low light conditions and with long exposure times. Apart from the modes, probably the most important setting relates to the output. With standard, your camera takes a photo without any special processing. If you select Superphoto, the camera automatically processes your photo. If you select HDR, several photos with different exposures are overlaid. This improves the dynamic range. In RAW mode, a RAW file is created, which is particularly suitable for editing. With this I want to say goodbye for today. If the video is interesting or helpful for you, give me a like as feedback. If you want to support this channel, you can use the link in the video description to buy me a coffee. There will be more videos about the Hero 9, so stay tuned and see you next time.